The Tokyo Disney Resort is a bucket list destination for many people. Those lucky enough to visit regard it as one of the best Disney resorts in the entire world, which is rather ironic, as it's not Disney. The park is entirely owned and operated by a company that, outside of licensing agreements, has nothing to do with the Walt Disney Company, and is situated in a country that Walt Disney personally wanted little involvement in. So how did they manage to convince the Disney Company to go against Walt's wishes and proceed to create one of the best Disney resorts worldwide? I'm Luke, and this is Review Time. Since the opening and immediate success of Disneyland in Anaheim, California on July the 17th, 1955, companies all around the world have wanted a piece of Disney's pie. One of the first companies who attempted to do so was the Matsuo Entertainment Company, who proposed to Walt a brand new Disneyland Japan after their president, Kenizo Matsuo, toured the original Disney theme park. Initial meetings between Disney and the Matsuo Entertainment Company went well, and it was agreed that the second Disney park in the world would be built in Nara, Japan's old capital city. Though towards the end of the construction phase of this future Disneyland Japan, when most of the park was already built, Disney and Matsuo began to have disagreements about the licensing fees they would be charged to utilize the Disney name and characters. And ultimately in 1961, the proposed Nara Disneyland would open as Nara Dreamland, with no official connection to Disney. Though with the park hitting such a late stage of development before being ultimately cancelled, it was easy to see what the park was meant to be and where its inspiration came from. And whilst I don't believe it ever would have been nearly as successful as Tokyo Disneyland, it's a shame that ultimately this failed Disneyland would go on to close down in 2006 due to the incredible success of Tokyo Disneyland. At the same time this fake Disneyland would open in Japan, another company, the Oriental Land Company, approached Walt Disney in the hopes of building their own Japanese Disneyland. Though considering that Disney had just had a falling out with another Japanese-based company, the timing of this proposal would ultimately see Walt Disney himself reject the project. But as time moved on, various influences would see the stakes shift in the Oriental Land Company's favor. The Oriental Land Company Limited, or OLC, was established on the 11th of July, 1960, as a joint venture between the Keisei Electric Rail Company, a privately owned Japanese railway, and the Mitsui Fudosan Company Limited, a major Japanese real estate developer. The company was originally created with the intention of reclaiming part of the sea off the Urasu coast of Tokyo Bay, originally used for fishing clams and seaweed, in order to develop commercial and residential areas, as well as a large-scale recreation facility, in the hopes of contributing to the country's culture, health, and welfare. Essentially, OLC started as a real estate company who was going to create the land they then intended to sell. The original plans for this recreation facility included approaching Disney in 1962 and proposing a licensing agreement where they would run a Disney park on the land. However, Walt Disney's negative dealings with Nara Dreamland soured him towards working with Japanese companies. So when contacted by OLC, he immediately turned them down. They still told Walt's brother Roy, though, that one day they would bring a Disneyland park to Japan. In 1964, without a major company tied to the leisure facility, OLC moved forwards on the land reclamation work. After 8 years of work, the reclamation, finished in 3 distinct sections, was complete, and work began on developing the new land's residential and commercial areas. Finally, in 1974, Oriental Land Company received approval to move forward on a brand new leisure facility idea called simply Oriental Land. Completely different to the Disney resort they had hoped for, this project would have included a themed playland, a theater, a fashion square, and a number of hotels, all themed around wonderful people and their world. Think of it as a dedicated Epcot World Showcase that would have explored and celebrated different cultures' food and entertainment. In the research phase for this Oriental Land, OLC sent research teams across Europe and the United States to study their respective leisure facilities. In May of 1972, one of these research teams was sent to look into Disneyland and Walt Disney World, and it was decided that Disney would still be the perfect company for their leisure area, and a Japanese Disneyland perfectly fit with their vision and would be incredibly more successful than their generic Oriental Land proposal. In February of 1974, OLC made a formal request for the top Disney executives to come to Japan on a fact-finding tour, and the official wining and dining of Disney's top brass began. After presenting Disney with the catchily named Oriental Land Feasibility Study Report 1974, which outlined the project and suitability of the land, focusing on its close proximity to the main metropolitan area of Tokyo. The Oriental Land Company was not without competition though, as Mitsubishi, yes, that Mitsubishi, was at the same time in discussions with Disney about them constructing a Disney park at the foot of Mount Fuji. In order to compare the two proposals, Disney bigwigs took a trip to Japan in December of 1974, where OLC truly rolled out the red carpet, beginning with a presentation looking at the suitability of the project, before they boarded a deluxe limousine bus and helicopter for a tour of the proposed site, where they could conveniently see from the air just how close it was to the Tokyo metropolitan area. Right after Disney had been shown both proposals, mysteriously and suddenly, Mitsubishi withdrew their offer to Disney, with sources suggesting it may have been due to pressure from the Japanese government, who saw a Disney park being a much bigger draw and ultimately more successful to international tourism if it was closer to Tokyo than Mount Fuji. Just 2 days after the initial meeting with OLC, Disney signed a basic agreement to pursue the possibility of building a Disneyland in Tokyo. So what had changed in the 12 years since Walt Disney had rejected that exact idea? Disney miraculously changed their mind about licensing their characters and attractions to a separate company when money troubles began to arise. Disney's films at the time were failing. Magic Kingdom was seeing lower attendance due to the 1973 oil crisis, and Epcot Center was running incredibly over budget, with Disney not being able to secure as many sponsors as they had originally hoped for. Oriental Land Company provided Disney with the perfect opportunity at the perfect time. They would pay for, operate, and advertise a brand new Disney park, and Disney would share in the profits. Over the next few years, Disney and OLC would iron out the kinks and the boring business parts, and ultimately, through intense negotiations, the Oriental Disneyland project, as it was called at the time, moved forward to the concrete design stage. Initially, Disney proposed new grandiose attractions and ideas for the park, but the Oriental Land Company executives rejected these, and ultimately they walked through Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom with Disney executives and Imagineers, essentially treating those two parks like a shopping list, with the Japanese businessmen famously pointing to attractions and saying they wanted that, whether it be because of the attraction itself or even just if it had a large line out the front of it. Ultimately, Tokyo Disneyland was designed as a close replica of the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World, with some of Disneyland's best offerings sprinkled in along the way. One major difference was the huge pavements and walkways, designed to accommodate for the large Japanese crowds expected to attend. Interestingly, Disney had approached the Oriental Land Company about making this new Disney park more Japanese, but they truly wanted the original parks to come over almost exactly as they were, with the American ideals of a turn-of-the-century entrance street, a small Mardi Gras celebrating New Orleans street, and even a land exploring the wonders of the Wild West. Originally, the budget for the project was set at a total of $284 million US, but almost instantly, this figure was realized to be way too low. And by the opening day of the park, the total cost had ballooned out to $640 million US, or around $2.3 billion today. On November 28, 1980, the park's construction plans were approved by the Chiba Prefecture, and OLC wasted no time getting to work on the construction, holding the groundbreaking ceremony just a few days later on the 3rd of December. Now, here is the part of the video where we would normally talk about the incredible difficulties and delays that occurred when constructing the park. However, utilizing Japanese business concepts such as Kaizen, a continuous striving for improvement from the CEO down to the assembly line workers, meant that the park was completed months ahead of schedule. 2 years and 4 months after ground was broken on the project, the construction of the park was complete. Instead of opening as soon as it can, or even before it should, here's looking at you, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Tokyo Disneyland used the time effectively to run new cast members through intensive park operations training, led by 150 employees who had each spent up to a year at Disneyland in California, learning about everything Disney parks, from the history of the Walt Disney Company to park operations, all the way down to specific technical knowledge for their relevant areas and attractions. On a rainy 15th of April 1983, Tokyo Disneyland officially opened to guests, with the ribbon being cut by President of OLC, Masatomo Takahashi, the chairman of the Disney Company, Card Walker, and of course, Mickey Mouse. After many discussions and the project almost falling through a few times due to disagreements on this, a licensing deal was signed off and agreed upon, in place from the opening day all the way till today. Oriental Land Company pays for everything from design to construction to operations, and for allowing OLC to utilize their name, characters, and attractions, Disney receives a 10% cut of ticket sales, as well as a 5% cut of merchandise and food sales. From the beginning, there were worries that the park would be too popular, and for the opening period, reservations were required in advance to attend the park. In the first 3 months of operation alone, 3 million advance tickets were sold, with a daily attendance cap for the park of 55,000 visitors, which sold out on a majority of weekends, weeks in advance. Ironically though, with one of the major shareholders in OLC being a railway company, one of the worst parts of this new resort was that in a country of great public transport, there wasn't really an easy way to get to the park. If you didn't have a car, like a lot of Japanese citizens don't, you originally had to catch the subway to Urasu Station, followed by a 20-minute bus ride to the park. But what would have awaited you on that opening day at Tokyo Disneyland after you alighted from the bus? As mentioned previously, Tokyo Disneyland is a close clone to the Magic Kingdom, with some of Disneyland thrown in, even featuring the same Cinderella castle as the park's centerpiece. Entering the first land of the park, you would instantly notice the American influence, with all of the products contained within being American in style, from the food to the merchandise. One interesting thing about this entrance land is that it's not called Main Street USA. Whilst having very familiar thematic buildings, this land is instead known as World Bazaar. Despite this international-sounding name, the land is still themed to a small, turn-of-the-century American town. The biggest difference, other than the name, is that this land is also covered by a roof, designed to protect guests from the elements such as rain and snow. The guest flow in the park and high expected guest numbers also influenced a major change in the park layout at World Bazaar, with the street splitting into a cross-like shape, allowing you to enter either Adventureland or Tomorrowland without ever stepping foot in the park's central hub. One of the few separations from the expected Magic Kingdom layout is that Tokyo Disneyland doesn't feature a train doing a grand circle tour of the entire park. This is due to Japanese railway regulations at the time, which mandated that trains stopping at multiple stations stick to a set schedule and require a separate ticket cost. To work around this, Tokyo Disneyland does feature a train, however it only stops at a single station and only travels around Adventureland, Westernland, the park's name for Frontierland, and today, also Critter Country. When the OLC executives were walking around the Magic Kingdom, one of the attractions they desperately wanted for their new park was the Mickey Mouse Revue, an animatronic show featuring Mickey, Minnie, and countless other Disney characters. However, rather than Disney creating a brand new version of the show for the park, they simply shipped out the Magic Kingdom version of the show to Tokyo. Elsewhere in Fantasyland is also the Haunted Mansion, continuing the tradition of that attraction being in a different land in each park it features in. Two of the only unique attractions in the park were presented in Tomorrowland. First was the Eternal Sea, a 200-degree film attraction that only lasted for a year before being replaced by Magic Journeys and then Captain EO. The show explored man's relationship with the oceans and seas and was one of the two attractions in the park focusing more on a Japanese perspective. The other was Meet the World, an attraction originally designed for Epcot's Japan Pavilion that had to be cancelled when the building couldn't support the theatre. The attraction was sponsored by Matsushita Electronics, making it one of the only free attractions in the park upon opening. The show in its simplest form was a Japanese history-focused rotating theatre, similar to the Carousel of Progress. However, rather than the audience being seated on the outside, they instead sat in the centre of the building, rotating around the stages and scenes on the outside. The park was an immediate success, and just less than a year after opening on the 2nd of April 1984, it welcomed its 10 millionth guest. This success saw the park immediately invest in expansion plans, introducing the Tokyo Disneyland Electrical Parade the next year, and would introduce official hotels starting just a few years later. Only 4 years after opening, the park had officially cleared the initial costs of construction and began to make a profit. And 10 years after opening, more than 150 million guests had walked through the gates of Tokyo Disneyland, which is extra impressive when you realize the population of Japan at the time was only 127 million. One unexpected success of the park, though, is that it was said to influence a new chapter in Japanese social history by providing a place where family outings could be fun for the whole family. Leisure was not always a part of the Japanese lifestyle. Fathers used to see family outings as a duty, but now at Disneyland, the dads are just as likely to be wearing Mickey ears and a smile as the kids. Today, Tokyo Disneyland is the third busiest theme park in the world, only beaten by the Magic Kingdom and Disneyland. But Tokyo Disney trumps them all in profit, being the most profitable Disney park in the world based on average guest expenditure. Today, Tokyo Disneyland is home to 2 world-class theme parks, 4 official Disney hotels, 20 Good Neighbor hotels, a shopping and dining precinct, and so much more. And all of that is thanks to the Oriental Land Company, who didn't give up, even when told no from the big man himself, Walt Disney. The story of the Tokyo Disney Resort echoes that of the Disney company itself. A company led by passionate men wanting to create something magical who wouldn't take no for an answer. In the almost 38 years since opening, the resort has gone on to see great success and expansion, with the largest and arguably most important expansion in the entire history of themed entertainment coming in 2001. But that's a story for another time. From the home of all things theme parks, I'm Luke for ReviewTyme. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing.